Ma'am, step out of the line, now.
I'm the captain. My credentials are right here.
I said those aren't valid. Move, now!
You need to scan it. I'm authorized to be here.
At 7:18 in the morning, Officer Travis Lang made a decision that would end his career, cost his department $21.1 million, and send 3 officers to federal prison. He did not know any of that yet. What he knew, what he decided in the span of a single glance, was that the woman standing in the pre-check line at Charlotte Douglas International Airport did not belong there. He did not check her identification. He did not scan her crew badge or examine the FAA credentials she had already extended toward him. He looked at her face and reached out and grabbed her arm. Her name was Captain Simone Brooks. She was 47 years old. She held a commercial airline captain's certificate, a first-class medical certification, and over 9,000 hours of logged flight time. She wore a crisp navy uniform, with 4 gold stripes on each sleeve. Her airline wings were pinned to her chest. None of it mattered to Officer Travis Lang. What happened in the 11 minutes that followed was captured by 7 security cameras positioned throughout the terminal concourse. Every word, every shove, every moment of force applied to a compliant, credentialed, uniformed captain who had done nothing except stand in a line she had every right to stand in. That footage would not stay inside Charlotte Douglas International Airport. It would reach 50 million views. It would trigger an FBI investigation. It would produce federal indictments, a record civil rights verdict, and a complete disbanding of the airport police force. Officer Travis Lang had 16 years on the job and 27 formal complaints on his record when he walked toward Captain Simone Brooks that morning. He had survived every one of those complaints. He was about to learn that cameras have no supervisors. Cameras do not file reports that disappear into filing cabinets. Cameras simply record and wait. If you have ever watched someone be treated as less than what they are, in a uniform, in a suit, anywhere, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one of these. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let's see where this story is reaching. And if someone you know needs to hear this, share it before you keep watching. The pre-check line at Charlotte Douglas International Airport moved the way it always did on a Tuesday morning, steadily, quietly, with the low hum of roller bags and the occasional shuffle of boarding passes being organized and reorganized. Captain Simone Brooks had passed through this exact terminal dozens of times. She knew the rhythm of it. She was already thinking about the flight. She had presented her captain's identification, her crew badge, and her FAA credentials before Officer Travis Lang's hand shot out and clamped around her upper arm. The grip was firm and immediate, the kind that does not ask questions. He pulled her sideways, out of line, in front of everyone. He announced to the concourse that the line was for verified crew only and told her to step aside. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Captain Brooks kept her voice level. She held her credentials up a second time and stated clearly that she was crew, that she was the captain, and that her documentation was in his hand. Officer Lang barely looked at it. He tossed the documents aside and reached for his radio. Back up at the checkpoint. Non-compliant subject. Possible imposter. The crowd stilled. What Lang did next required no radio call to justify. He shoved Captain Brooks toward the wall, spun her, and drove her face first into the metal screening table. Her glasses cracked on impact. A shard caught her cheek and opened a cut that bled across the stainless steel. He drove his knee into her upper back and pressed his full weight down. The shoulder joint gave with an audible pop, a sound that several witnesses later described in identical terms in their federal statements. She cried out once. Then she went quiet, repeating through gritted teeth that she was not resisting. 3 feet away, Officer Neil Stanton watched and said nothing. Travelers pulled out phones. One man, a retired airline captain, pushed toward the front of the crowd, raised his phone, and stated clearly that the woman was injured and compliant and that he was calling emergency services. Lang warned him off. The retired captain kept recording. 11 minutes. 7 cameras. Every frame of it preserved. Chief Bernard Foley arrived at a run, out of breath, tie loosened. He took in the scene in one sweep. The blood on the table, the credentials scattered across the floor, the woman in full captain's uniform sitting with one arm hanging at an unnatural angle, and the color left his face. He leaned toward Lang and said something low and urgent. It was already too late. The first bystander videos were uploading before the paramedics arrived. Captain Simone Brooks refused to be moved until federal agents reached the terminal. She sat upright on a metal bench, right shoulder dislocated, blood drying on her jaw, and she waited. Officer Travis Lang was placed on administrative leave before the shift ended. Witnesses later reported seeing him in the break room less than an hour after the incident, laughing. 7 camera angles. All of them pointed at the same blood-stained table. The real story the one that would take down not just Lang but the structure that had protected him for 16 years, was only beginning. The paramedics had barely cleared the terminal when the subpoenas arrived. Special agents from the Charlotte FBI field office reached Charlotte Douglas International Airport within 20 minutes of the first bystander videos going live. They did not ask for the security footage. They seized it, all of it, under federal authority before the airport's own legal team had been notified. 7 fixed cameras covering the pre-check concourse. Officer Travis Lang's body camera, logged in the department's own system as malfunctioned on the morning in question. The agents pulled the raw files anyway. The body camera had recorded every second. What the footage showed, across all 8 sources, was the same sequence of events rendered from 8 different angles. Captain Simone Brooks, approaching the pre-check lane in full uniform. Her credentials extended before she was asked. Officer Lang's hand reaching out before a single document had been scanned. The takedown. The knee. The blood on the table. And the audio. Clear, unambiguous, preserved in the body camera's microphone. Lang's voice saying what he said to her while she lay there, that people like her were always trying to sneak through. The agents froze on one additional frame. After the takedown, in the seconds before backup arrived, Lang turned toward Officer Neil Stanton and said something. The lip read matched the audio. 4 words. Watch this one get bumped. He was smiling when he said it. That clip ran on national news within 48 hours. By the end of the week, it had been viewed 50 million times. The investigation widened before the bruises on Captain Brooks's shoulder had fully set. Federal agents pulled internal complaint records for the entire airport police department. What they found buried in those files was not a pattern of isolated incidents. It was a ledger. Officer Travis Lang had accumulated 27 formal complaints over 15 years on the force. 24 of them involved black or minority travelers. None had resulted in termination. Several had been downgraded to counseling memos before being filed and forgotten. Lieutenant Frank Ingram's department email account was subpoenaed next. The messages did not require much interpretation. Ingram had not merely known about Lang's complaint history. He had participated in it, actively, enthusiastically, in writing. The emails documented an informal competition that had been running for years inside the department. Officers wagering on how many minority crew members and passengers each could redirect from priority lanes during a single shift. The highest scorer at the end of the week collected the pot. Ingram had organized multiple rounds. He had kept score. He had distributed winnings. 14 additional crew members came forward in the weeks that followed. Flight attendants, co-pilots, a ground operations supervisor, all with accounts that tracked closely with what had happened to Captain Brooks. Same terminal, same tactics, different shifts, different years. Not one of their complaints had produced a suspension. Before the rest of this story unfolds, and what comes next will change how you think about accountability in this country, hit that subscribe button. If you've ever seen something like this happen in an airport, a hotel, a restaurant, anywhere, drop your city in the comments. Let's see where this is reaching. Now back to the story. The bombshell that turned a civil rights case into a national aviation crisis came from an inventory of Captain Brooks's personal effects. The items scattered across the terminal floor when Lang drove her into the table. Inside her flight bag was a time-sensitive FAA safety report. She had been assigned to hand-deliver it to regulators in Washington that morning. The document required a physical chain of custody signature, a protocol specific to its classification. The assault delayed her by hours. When the report failed to arrive at its scheduled time, the FAA's automated compliance system triggered an emergency review. Regulators could not verify the status of the document or its courier. Under protocol, they issued an emergency grounding of the airline's entire wide-body fleet pending confirmation. Hundreds of flights were canceled in a single afternoon. Thousands of passengers were stranded across 11 major airports. The airline's operations center worked through the night. The financial loss ran into the tens of millions. All of it traceable, through an unbroken chain of documented events, back to one officer's decision to grab a black woman in uniform and decide she was not what she said she was. Chief Bernard Foley had spent the hours after the assault attempting damage control. His movements after arriving on scene were captured in full by the same cameras that recorded everything else. He had instructed officers to collect witness contact information, which witnesses interpreted correctly as an attempt to identify who had been recording. Several refused and left the terminal. One filed a separate federal complaint. Foley's attempt to limit the spread of the footage, documented on camera, became its own count in the indictment. 6 weeks after the assault, a federal grand jury in the Western District of North Carolina returned indictments against 3 officers. Lang, Ingram, and Foley each faced charges under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 242, assault under color of law, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, obstruction of justice. The department had spent 15 years protecting Travis Lang. The cameras had spent 11 minutes recording him. The math was not complicated. The federal trial began on a Monday morning in January and lasted 4 weeks. The courtroom was full every day. Legal observers, aviation industry representatives, civil rights attorneys, and members of the public who had waited in line before sunrise to secure seats. Outside, on the plaza, supporters gathered in smaller numbers with signs that carried Captain Brooks's name and airline wings. Inside, the proceedings were controlled and methodical, the way federal trials are. No outbursts, no theater, just evidence and testimony moving through the record one item at a time. The jury watched the footage on the second day. All 8 camera angles, each played in sequence, and then simultaneously in a split-screen reconstruction prepared by the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit. They watched Captain Brooks extend her credentials. They watched Lang ignore them. They watched the takedown, the knee, the blood. They heard the audio. Several jurors stopped taking notes. One pressed a hand to her mouth and did not move it for a long time. Lang took the stand in the 3rd week. His defense was procedural. He had followed training. The situation had presented indicators that warranted intervention. The physical contact had been proportional. Cross-examination took the better part of a day. The prosecution introduced the department's own use of force training manual, which did not authorize any of what the footage showed, and then moved to Lang's text messages. 43 messages recovered from his personal phone, sent over 4 years, celebrating betting pool wins and referencing redirected crew members by race. His attorneys objected to the characterization of several messages. The objections were noted and overruled. The smirking body cam clip was played last, just before closing arguments. Watch this one get bumped. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict was unanimous on every count. Officer Travis Lang received 7 years in federal prison and a lifetime prohibition from holding any law enforcement position. Lieutenant Frank Ingram received 4 years. Chief Bernard Foley received 3 years and forfeited his pension. State-level charges followed in the weeks after sentencing, extending the legal exposure for Ingram and Foley on additional counts related to the cover-up. A parallel FAA review concluded that the department's targeting of minority crew members had created documented safety risks, delayed reports, disrupted crew rotations, flight operations run without properly rested captains who had been held at checkpoints. The review's findings were forwarded to every major airport authority in the country. The civil lawsuit moved separately and settled before it reached a jury. The City of Charlotte and the Airport Authority agreed to a payment of $21.1 million in compensatory and punitive damages, the largest civil rights verdict against an airport police department in United States history. 19 other crew members and passengers subsequently filed suits. Their combined settlements added millions more to the total accountability. Then came the decision that no one in the department had believed was possible. The airport police force was disbanded. Not restructured, not retrained, disbanded. Every officer's commission revoked. The department's budget, equipment, and jurisdiction transferred to a transitional authority operating under a 10-year consent decree with the United States Department of Justice. The terms required mandatory bias training for all new hires, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, external review of every formal complaint, and quarterly compliance reporting. The systemic architecture that had absorbed 27 complaints against one officer and returned him to the floor each time, that architecture was taken apart. It took 15 years to build. It took 4 months to dismantle. 2 years after the assault, Captain Simone Brooks walked back through the same terminal at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Her uniform was crisp. Her airline wings were on her chest. She moved through the pre-check lane without incident, the way she always had, the way she had a right to. Behind the checkpoint, new signage identified the Civilian Oversight Board's office, a permanent installation, visible to every traveler passing through. TSA agents nodded as she passed. A fellow captain raised a hand in greeting from across the concourse. She nodded back and kept moving. She had used a portion of her settlement to establish the Simone Brooks Aviation Justice Fund, a national nonprofit providing free legal representation to minority pilots, flight attendants, and travelers who had experienced discrimination in aviation. In its first year, the fund had taken on more than 200 cases across 30 states. It had produced policy changes at 6 major airports. The final image from that morning is a fixed security camera frame. Captain Simone Brooks walking past the exact spot where she once bled on a metal table, stride unbroken, head level, wings gleaming. Travis Lang had looked at her and seen something he could move out of a line. He had 17 years on the force, a betting pool, a complicit command structure, and 27 complaints that had gone nowhere. He forgot about the cameras. He forgot they never blink. And he forgot that neither does she.